Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few things. We welcome your questions and encourage you to post them in the chat feature. I will be monitoring questions throughout the presentation, and also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded and it will be on our ACRO webinars archive page, hopefully within the next 24 hours. And if you haven't already, please do turn on closed captions. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Mark McConaughey. Thanks, Mark.
Hi, and Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everybody had a good set of holidays, that you were able to relax, that your semesters are just about ready to get underway, and that you are calm, cool, and collected and interested in what we have to talk about today, which is Open Syllabus. I am Mark McConaughey. I'm the Innovative Credential Coordinator at ACRO. I've been doing that for about the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was the Associate Vice Provost and Registrar at Indiana University in Bloomington. I did that for about 13 years, but I was at the institution for close to 40 years. And I know what you're saying to yourself, that you must have started when you were 5 years old, and that's absolutely true. I did. But nevertheless, so here we are, and today I'm so happy to be able to share this webinar with Joe Karagenis, who is the director of Open Syllabus, and I'm gonna read basically their descriptive paragraph. Open Syllabus is a massive nonprofit archive of teaching and instruction across higher education. It provides top-down views of the curriculum across thousands of schools to support curricular innovation, lifelong learning, and student success. Open Syllabus works to expand the boundaries of open education, and most of its tools are free for use. So think about that, if you will. Massive aggregation of teaching and learning. And think about the possibilities, promises there. Basically, you use it operationally. We all are involved as registrars and admissions folks in transfer articulation. Often as we take in those courses from another institution and we have to map those into our own curricular context, what we need to know is, what are the learning outcomes associated with this? How does this fit in the discipline in which we offer courses? How does that work? And imagine if you had a full repository, if you haven't already articulated it, you have a full repository of syllabi in which much of this information that you would otherwise have to go search on the internet to find is already there for you. So it already works operationally. Mass aggregation of this data can be used analytically. Think about it. What can you do if all of a sudden you have all this syllabus information regarding learning outcomes, about how pedagogies are put together within disciplines? This offers a huge source of information about how you can basically define, modify, or even analyze your own curriculum. And not only that, it can be used transformationally. I know that Joe will speak about this at least a little bit with the advent of AI and this huge repository of information. Imagine, if you will, being able to derive various kinds of learning outcomes, being able to map them across institutions, and perhaps even better, well, I won't say even better, but even in addition, being able to map them to skills and competencies that can be used in different business spaces, such as the labor market. So this is what we're really talking about. So Joe is prepared to tell us all about Open Syllabus, to do some demos. The only thing I would additionally say is, if you're considering any kind of program or initiative involving innovative credentials, think about what Open Syllabus could provide in terms of a resource. We'll talk more about that at the conclusion of Joe's demonstration, but I just want to plant that in your head, just think about the huge repository, the possibilities for AI, and what this could possibly mean and how it could serve you and your institution. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Joe, please tell us all about Open Syllabus.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you for the opportunity to present. I'll just preface by saying I'm in day 3 of the flu and not at my best here. So I'll ask your forbearance if I have to stop to have a fit of coughing or something. I'll just going to do my best. But I didn't want to postpone this opportunity because I know these are hard slots to get, and I wanted to take advantage of it. So just to I'll give a brief overview of what Open Syllabus is and what it does. I think end by suggesting where we're going in the future as we begin to think about syllabi as a resource for creating skills maps and turning the curriculum into a very granular set of skills maps that, of course, then can become a kind of translation layer between classroom learning and workforce requirements, job needs, etc. So that's where we're headed. Where we've been, I'll spend a few minutes on that. Open Syllabus started at Columbia University in 2014. Primarily, it was as a set of research questions. It was a research project for several years as we began to think about what you could do if you could collect syllabi at scale and analyze them at scale. Of course, syllabi have been objects of interest for a long time, but they were hard to work with. They're hard to collect. Research using syllabi to that point had been mostly the province of small-scale, qualitative studies of small collections of syllabi. So we began to develop methods for collecting at scale in the millions because technologies and practices were converging in ways that meant that faculty, departments, and schools were beginning to put syllabi online in large numbers. Machine learning was developing to the point where small teams could develop tools for parsing these materials. So instead of having a raw text, you could begin to pull out the important structured elements of the document. So for us, that's things like title, course code description, dates, learning outcomes, and the assigned titles. So a lot of our work at the outset was really about citation extraction. So what's taught? How does that change over time? How does it vary school to school or region to region or country to country? And the questions we were most interested in at the outset had mostly to do with what fields are and how they interrelate. So my approach to this question came from having come out of a literature background and having moved into the social sciences and then becoming involved in debates about the field of communications in the context of work at the Social Science Research Council, where I worked for a number of years. I was a newcomer to a field that was caught up in questions about what it was. Of course, all fields debate their identity. There are running debates in most fields about what the field is, what its boundaries are, what's inside or outside the field. In media communication studies, to me, that felt like it was entirely a debate about what the field should become, right? These are mostly debates about where the field should go rather than what it is, because there are very few ways of grasping what the field is at any given time. Our hypothesis was that you could do that with using assigned titles as a proxy for what the field is, that you could begin to look at the sum of teaching choices by the faculty at thousands of schools in a given field as a kind of fingerprint for the field at that particular time, and as an anchor for debates that would tend to be more speculative or forward-looking about whether the field should be more empirical, theoretical, policy-oriented, and so on. So that work really was sort of phase 1 of Open Syllabus, and it led to a set of technologies and set of tools for collecting and analyzing syllabi and their assigned titles at scale. We now have a collection of around, and that work continues. We now have a collection of around 23 million syllabi. primarily out from outside the US at this point. I think our collection is only around 45% US, if I recall. So we have built an international archive for curricular materials. And that first set of applications, I'll show you what this looks like in a second, was designed to give faculty and curricular designers, centers for teaching and learning, and librarians tools for understanding the curriculum, not just at their schools, but at other schools. So if we have a good collection for your school, we can typically provide a better view of the curriculum than the school currently has available. If we don't, and for most schools we don't, because it's a big world and syllabus publication practices are varied, we can still always provide a better comparative view of other schools. And that comparative view of other schools is often very important, and in a variety of contexts of program design, curricular design, and so on. I'll show you what that looks like. I'll share screen, and everything I'm going to show you, you can play with on yourself. It's all online. It's all freely available with a couple caveats. And it's all pretty deep, and I'm only going to give a very cursory view of this, in a very cursory presentation. But let's see. Okay. Hopefully you can now see Open Syllabus Analytics. Okay, great. So this syllabus collection, which in the current version, the version online here is 21 million syllabi. The next version will be published next week, possibly. It'll be about 23 million. This is our wrapper for the syllabus collection, and it provides lots of different ways of navigating the corpus and diving into views of the curriculum, the global curriculum by top assigned authors, schools, and so on. Again, this is you can play with all this yourself, but let's say this is how we typically represent a school. If you want to look at the curriculum at the University of Melbourne in terms of assigned titles, you can do that. You can drill into it you can filter by year and see what the curriculum in architecture in the last couple of years looks like. You can look at it by title. You can look at syllabi that assign that title. So I'm just jumping across the major kind of what we think of as the verticals within the data, the major ways of navigating the data by school, by title, by syllabus, by learning outcome. And then when we talk about a syllabus, we are publishing only an abbreviated, anonymized view of the document. And so this would be a typical one where we pull out a description, a set of learning outcomes, and a set of assigned texts. So this is our way of navigating the privacy and copyright concerns around syllabi. We are only pulling out the descriptive portions that they anonymize the instructor, and they're not representing the full the full text of the document. And then there's just lots of ways of of working with the material through these different verticals. And again, I would encourage you to play with it yourselves. We have other we have other tools for doing things like mapping the demand for open titles, which of course is a priority at many schools and in some state systems. We trace gender statistics across the platform. This is this is sort of phase one of Open Syllabus, and this is wrapped up as a subscription product, so you can get to much of the data for free, but then if you want to provide access at the school level, that requires a subscription. And the middle point is you can sign up for a free trial, and that's how you get to sort of anybody can sign up for a free trial and play with this for a month. We are working toward a model in which schools subscribe and also contribute. So all of this data to date is based on scraping, which has created a very large collection, but of course it's only a fraction, and a fraction that we estimated around 7 or 8% of syllabi in the US at present of the total. And so for this to move forward, we really need schools to begin to contribute syllabi and not just use the service. So that's really the the gamble that we've taken, that we can create services that are valuable enough to schools for them to become not just subscribers to these services, but contributors to them. And that's what we mean by becoming an archive. And it's an archive based that eventually, it really has to be based on school participation in creating a national and global curricular archive. I won't spend any more time on this. I think it's probably the object of least interest to this group. It will be of a lot more interest to librarians at your schools, to curricular designers, and those are really the core audiences for this product, students as well. One of the problems we identified fairly early on as we began to think about what having a giant curricular archive could sort of unlock in terms of addressing kind of structural challenges in higher ed is, of course, question of course transfer. We got quite good at determining when we had two syllabi how similar they were. So, part of the difficulty of course transfer in the US is just a simple problem. Well, some of it is just a simple problem of understanding course similarity. How do you know whether a course is identical, very similar, not very similar? It's a problem that passes through individual review. It's a problem that we determined fairly early on could begin to be automated, at least in an advisory capacity, so that a kind of first pass at understanding course similarity could be done with machine learning tools. So we got quite good at that when we had two syllabi, which of course provide a lot of detail about the course contents, and realized that we didn't have enough guaranteed coverage across schools to be confident that if in a typical use case, if a student wanted to look up a class, pick a class that they've taken and wanted to look for a best possible match at a possible destination school, whether we could scan across all of the courses at that school and identify a best match. With a syllabus collection at 7 or 8%, that was not going to be very likely to find an exact match on either side of the transfer. And so we began to bootstrap these methods to working with course catalog data, which of course is much more readily available and generally public under state law. And so we began to build a parallel data set based on course catalogs. That is now online in the form of the Course Matcher, which at the moment covers 1,154 schools in the US and Canada, and has at least single-year coverage for every catalog, single-year catalog coverage at every one of those schools, in some cases more years. But it provides a basis for doing that sort of guaranteed match where you can pick a course at one school and find the best possible matches at another school. And this is our tool for supporting in an advisory capacity a kind of a research resource for both students and decision makers at schools to simplify that initial process of determining course similarity. So I'll show you what that looks like. These are color coded depending on how many syllabi we have from the school. We have a lot of Texas, because Texas mandates publication of syllabi, which makes them a very useful state for our purposes. And I don't know offhand what these schools are, but we'll find out shortly. If you have questions and want to raise them in stream, please do. I know I'm covering a lot of territory very quickly. Like I said, this is really something you should play around with.
Joe, we do have one question. And it says, I know some regions have mandates to publicly display their syllabi. Do you find institutions use open syllabi for that purpose or primarily for the analytics?
Yeah, so we are not a syllabus publication tool, although we've discussed ways in which analytics could serve that purpose, but typically not. For schools operating under state requirements, Texas is the first of those. Florida has new state law governing publication of syllabi. There are a couple of other states that have been talking about it and could well be there in the next year or two. Generally, they do require the publication of the full document, and we are very expressly not publishing the full documents in order to not get mixed up in questions of faculty re-identification and kind of surrounding copyright issues. We've thought about ways in which we could move in that direction if there's interest in it, but it has been fairly peripheral to our goals at this stage. Excuse me. So here we are with a map of the similarity of over 10,000 courses between Howard College and the University of Texas at Tyler. You can drill down and do a single course lookup, but this gives you an idea about of what the database does. First thing it does is it compares every course to every other course in the catalog and scores their similarity. So here we have two courses. If I have a credit for a juvenile justice system course at Howard, that's the catalog description. And because we have syllabi from both sides of that comparison, you can get to side-by-side comparison of the two classes. And this is envisaged as a research resource, an advisory resource. On the one hand, for students who don't understand transfer and for whom it's often a black box. And on the other side, for faculty and decision makers in registrars' offices who often have very limited resources for doing that lookup. So we will typically show the most recent syllabus we have in the corpus. This one is pulling up a 2013 syllabus, which is probably too old to be relevant, but one of the things we found is that determination really varies school to school and field to field. Schools will make their own determinations based on the course and field as to what the kind of freshness of the comparison needs to look like in order for it to be treated as transferable or valid. So a computer science course may have much stricter recency requirements than a course on 18th century British literature. So this is the kind of comparison we can make through the course matcher. And again, generally we will pull out as much information from the documents as is available. And of course, syllabi vary a great deal in what they make available. They can be extremely limited, as in the case of this Howard College one on the left. Description, learning outcomes, and the assigned titles are the keys that we use to provide a kind of informed view of course similarity. So that's live, freely available, and growing in terms of coverage. We're beginning to integrate it with the subscription model that we make available on analytics. So that we are looking for schools to subscribe to this as a service. We're also integrating it with several sort of back-end workflow products that are managing course transfer, as a set of back-end tools. And the coverage is growing rapidly. So we have 1,150 now. I think we'll be at 2,000 within a few months. We've got our kind of flywheel going to really build out the coverage very quickly. And that will include international coverage, which, if the interstate provisions for course transfer are limited in the US, of course, they're basically non-existent for international transfer. So that's where we're headed with the course matcher. So analytics and the course matcher are what I think of as sort of the two legs of the open syllabus stool. The third leg is the one that got featured in the title of this presentation, and that is work on skills. So every one of these syllabi can be viewed as a resource for skills description. And of course, faculty have been trained over the course of the last 30 years to write detailed learning outcomes. That is an amazing resource. Learning outcomes are an extraordinarily rich source of information, of condensed information about skills and learning in those classes. And they are an entirely separate universe from the skills conversations. The skills conversations tend to be built around skills taxonomies derived from job postings and CVs, which get boiled down into lists of skills. Schools are often in a position where they are, you know, buying or gaining access to these taxonomies in an effort to understand how their curricula correspond to job requirements or to sort of employment trends in their areas. There's a real disconnect between the massive effort over 30 years to train faculty in describing learning that appears on the syllabi and these skills taxonomies as they are generated from and circulate within the employment world. So we're trying to bridge that gap. We can. The methods for doing so at present are pretty crude, I have to say. If you work with the Lightcast API, the Lightcast is one of the companies that maintains a very large skills taxonomy, and I think it is probably or undoubtedly the largest and most common in use in the higher ed sector. But the way you get from a course document to skills in the Lightcast taxonomy is it's just a straight phrase and keyword lookup. So if certain phrases appear in the syllabus, they get sort of extracted out, and you get a very reduced view of the concrete items that are words or phrases in the syllabus that are also present in the taxonomy. We've theorized that the learning outcome work that faculty have been trained to do could provide a much richer basis for a skills taxonomy than you could get out of CVs and job postings. And there's been some interesting work by Amanda Welsh in particular to compare the richness of the vocabularies that are used by faculty in describing learning and the vocabularies that appear in the skills taxonomies of the major, primarily employment side skills taxonomies. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that faculty do a much better job of this than the average job posting or CV. So all of that is, there's a very rich and higher ed side taxonomy nascent in this collection of syllabi that we've been interested in pulling out and developing. We've also come to the understanding that the world probably doesn't need another skills taxonomy, and that the job of building and maintaining one is not something we wanted to make our life's work. And so we're working with others who are doing a better job of that, and who hopefully will be able to bring a lot more of the nuance embedded in these documents out and available in the context in which they can be then kind of crosswalked to jobs and embedded into different kinds of credential wallets and generally made available in this, for all of the efforts that are kind of trying to reinvent the credential space. So our primary partners in that work are at George Washington University. This is a group that are developing an AI tool called Laser that is at least if they can deliver on where they're going with this, it'll be a kind of one ring to rule them all. It will be able to work with any of the available taxonomies and translate across all of them, which would be amazing. It's the kind of problem that AI is likely to be very good at solving. So instead of worrying about whether the Lightcast taxonomy is, if kind of erasing large areas of skills and learning because it doesn't account for soft skills very well, and its means of identifying them in a syllabus are fairly rudimentary, you'll be able to get much richer classification and taxonomization of skills in these documents than was available before, with a lot more lot more layers of directionality, general versus particular, and other kinds of features of skills that have the potential to provide a very different view of the curriculum than is currently available. So that's where we're headed with this. And to give you a kind of rough, very, very rough preview, when we began to map learning outcomes across the corpus, so I should say that the conversation piece for open syllabus work is the co-assignment galaxy. This is about as close, well, it's probably the best representation of higher ed overall as currently exists. This is a map of the top 1,000,000 assigned titles across all of higher ed, or I should say Anglophone higher ed. And they cluster in function of how often the titles are assigned together. So they cluster effectively into fields because courses that are assigned together frequently tend to be assigned together frequently because they're assigned in the same field. And you begin to get these very interesting kind of structural maps of higher ed that, in this case, uses title assignment as a way to delineate the boundaries between fields. This is something you can play with too. If I assume most of you are inclined in this way, and will find some, it tends to be an object of real interest for people in our area. But you can do the same thing with skills. So here the raw material is titles and co-assignment of titles on syllabi. Here, and this is just a very preliminary kind of static view, it's the text and learning outcomes and how often those co-appear. So you can begin to get very detailed maps of skills as they are distributed across different fields. And from there, you can begin to, create, create means of crosswalking skills as they appear in learning outcomes, because learning outcomes can be phrased in variant ways, but they're referring to the same thing. And this kind of clustering enables you to deal with a lot of that fuzziness around the characterization of the learning outcome. So this is how we go from learning outcomes to skills vocabularies. And the folks at George Washington are going to be the ones who built the tools to really implement that. So our goal organizationally is to publish out skills maps for every syllabus we get as an open data set, and to contribute that back to the community as just a core public good. Because we think that this is, there's a huge number of efforts in this area working with skills and credentialization. We don't have any particular ambitions to develop our own tools on top of this kind of skills mapping, but we think it would be enormously valuable for the community to be able to work with these things as an open data set. So that's how we see our role in the future with regard to the skills data set, to just be primarily a publisher, and use that again as an incentive for schools to contribute. So we're trying to build up the incentives for schools to play. And if they send us their syllabi, they get curricular analytics back. You get resources to support course transfer decision making, and you get skills maps that can feed into this emerging ecology of skills and credentialization efforts. Mark, I can leave it at that if that brings us to time.
Well, I tell you, Joe, you've got a plethora of questions here. So why don't we go through that? Because I think this will, and some very interesting ones. Let me start with one we got from Logan Key. Joe, are your institutional clients using this tool to help identify learning objectives and content across courses within their own institution? For instance, if institutional leaders wanted to efficiently pinpoint what courses, perhaps across scores of departments, contain content in a particular topic of interest.
Yeah, I mean, we have identified that as as a constituency on campus. We haven't been very successful at reaching them. I mean, one of the things we've found and learned over the last 18 months or so is that we're basically operating in a retail sector where you have to be able to talk to hundreds of schools and reach out to hundreds of librarians and centers for teaching and learning and registrars offices, and we don't have a sales and marketing team. So we are trying to work with organizations that do that work because we simply don't have the bandwidth to manage a lot of that outreach organizationally. So our we grew out of the library space, and most of our relationships are with libraries and library organizations. The constituency for that learning outcome analysis as an input into curricular design overlaps the library space. It tends to be, more centers for teaching and learning, but those are all sometimes independent, and we don't have a good leg into that community organizationally. So, it's already a stretch for us to move into the registrar space, and we have, we have tools that are dedicated for that now. But we're trying to move, yes, I mean, if I welcome suggestions about how to reach the teaching and learning communities, um, in an efficient way. It's a question of how we make use of our limited time and resources to reach out to people. And obviously, this is a good vehicle for doing that, but in other cases, we just haven't really figured out how to do it.
Just to add on though, and kind of a question, there's nothing to prevent basically anyone, and maybe this is a subscription-based thing, but if all of my content was up in Open Syllabus, there's nothing to prevent me from doing the exact kind of analysis that is suggested here. Is that true?
Yeah, you can certainly do it. You could do it today if you'd like. There are many schools for which we have complete collections, and so
Right.
those schools could sign up or they could do it on a trial basis or whatever. All of that information is available and accessible. Um, what we find sometimes is that there are research purposes that aren't well served by by the interface we've built around the data, and we also provide research data sets that are just more purpose built to the needs of whoever is asking. If we identify a consistent need that we haven't accommodated through the interface, then we add something to the interface that handles it. A lot of our development tends to be kind of demand driven in that respect. Um,
Okay, another question. How much does your work relate to the transfer articulation agreements before a course is taken versus transfer evaluation after the course is taken?
yeah, so the course matcher the course matcher scores similarity without any consideration of rules. So it is working entirely on the basis of semantic similarity within the descriptions, based on a model that we built from syllabi. So, there are there's a lot of depth to the model that then gets applied to this very thin layer of course description material from the catalogs, which works a lot better than we thought it would. It really does. You're not working with a lot of material with these course catalog descriptions, but the model, and the model works. The model, gets it right the vast majority of times. What we have envisioned as a next step is to begin to fold in, um, rules-based matches, and we think of this as this sort of the difference between green and gold matches, where we can surface millions of new kind of green unproven matches that schools can then turn into gold matches. So if a school wanted to, for example, um, treat treat anything with a 99% match score as an officially sanctioned transferable class, they could vastly expand their articulation catalog. And that's one way in which we envision this being used. That as the model gets better, as school confidence in it grows, for the top matches, it could just be taken as pro forma. These are at least insofar as curricular similarity is the determining factor in articulation, these can be treated as matched classes. So it's that we see it at the moment. It's a good tool for surfacing new matches, but one of the ways in which it will be improved is doing just that, folding back in approved matches as new training data and as another signal that we can provide back to students and staff.
A quick follow-up question on that is, what's your level of confidence if in order to get 99% on Course Matcher, is it necessary to have both the catalog and the syllabus? What level can you reach based on only the course catalog?
The scoring is only based on the course catalog at present.
Okay.
The syllabus data just becomes a way of enriching the comparison and just deepening the resource available for a decision by whoever's making the decision at the school.
Got it.
Yeah, we can and might reintegrate syllabus data at some point, but we've been focused mostly on expanding the catalog coverage at present.
Right. Thank you. Do you imagine use cases in which your tools are able to surface data that helps campuses to identify skills, competencies, and learning outcomes that are not currently named in their catalog, but perhaps could be? In other
That's an
words,
interesting question.
identifying something that isn't there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And the limitations of all of the limitations of this sort of taxonomy based approach to skills is that if it's not in the taxonomy, you don't find it. So yeah, they're almost by definition not good at discovery of new things. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the syllabi are potentially a much richer resource for building out these taxonomies than the current available raw materials for the employment side taxonomy. So I'd be interested in the question of what you could do, of what a syllabus-derived taxonomy would look like, and I suspect it would be just a lot richer, and of course much better aligned with higher ed than what you get out of Lightcast, for example. And yeah, it's an interesting question. We
Yeah.
don't currently plan to do that, but somebody should.
Does AI help you with that?
So AI certainly helps with the building of a taxonomy, and it helps with extracting. So if you could use AI to build a new taxonomy from these documents. So if we have a million syllabi and asked an AI tool to say, okay, find the top 20,000 concepts and skills in this corpus, and that's a very easy question for an AI to answer. I'd say that kind of blithely. Maybe it's not as simple as that, but in principle, that's the sort of question an AI is well positioned to do a lot more easily than previous tools. And then you can feed it new documents, and it will do a very good job at pulling out the concepts that match the existing taxonomy. That's another AI-friendly task. Whether or not it's good at surfacing new concepts from new documents, I don't know. I mean, in principle, I mean, it's a question of what you have to have a reference point for the skills conversation that these taxonomies. One of the reasons that it's hard to work with many of them is that they're messy, they're updated, they change over time, and it's hard to develop a stable structure for managing that change over time as skills change, as the descriptive language that people use for those skills changes. The work of the guys at George Washington is really zeroed in on that problem of how you deal with descriptions of skills and learning that vary but are essentially describing the same thing. So we're leaning on them for that layer of the work, and the other nice thing about what they're doing is that they can output to any existing taxonomy. And you need to, if it needs to be the Lightcast taxonomy, they can work with that. If it's ONET or Open Skills Network, they can output to that. I mean, there's a lot of utility to being able to work across the different taxonomies that have developed over the years. There are different national taxonomies. We've like I said, kind of bracketed that problem because it's a thorny one, and it's not one that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives on.
So another one for you, Joe. Did you mention if in the reporting and sharing with you, schools are affirmatively identifying courses for which they have already issued transfer credit, thereby allowing you to display 100% matches that you can then serve as helpful indicators to other schools?
So we have not integrated that data yet. We can begin to pull in transfer tables and process them, and yes, do that so that when we are doing our scoring of course similarity, if there's an existing match, then we can treat that as a kind of gold articulation. Yeah, that's next phase work for us. Some of it is going to be coming in through some of the workflow tools that we're beginning to integrate with, so that as schools develop rules that get fed into, for example, ASU's uh, transfer articulation tool, we can then pull in those rules and create a kind of close the loop basically. As new rules are created, we're able to account for them on our side too, and provide that data back in the context of new lookups as they occur through the tool, through other people's tools.
Great. Another one for you. In addition to course level comparisons, do you envision expanding to program level comparisons?
Yeah, we do not at present know anything about programs. Um, yeah, so we don't have the kind, we have two sources of information. We have syllabi and we have catalogs. We don't have anything that describes program or degree structure. We've thought about ways in which we could begin to derive that from catalog data, and most catalogs will also do quite a bit to describe program structure, but at this stage, no. Where it's really hard to compare program structure school to school, and um, we haven't really made much of an attempt to do that yet.
So Joe, this question's from Mike Simmons. What would you say to ACRO members, registrars in particular, to convince them to share their syllabi and resources? And gosh, it just moved down on me. Their syllabi and resources. What are the objections you commonly hear, and how would you answer them?
Well, I think we've, uh, like I said, I mean, organizationally, our goal has been to um, provide enough services back to schools so that doing the administrative lift once to get the syllabi together and to make them available to us unlocks a whole range of services for different constituencies of the school. What we've found is that the library is not the right, um, is not solely capable of undertaking that in most cases. Um, generally the issue is that there is an administrative lift required to determine where the syllabi are even in some cases, what the chain of control of those documents looks like, whether a decision can be made unilaterally by the provost's office or has to pass through the faculty senate. And there are a lot of possible checkpoints on this that in conversations have often make people wary of undertaking them because there's just a lot of potential. It requires quite a bit of effort. Um, So we've, at some schools that's not an issue. Some schools that have, that already publish everything online or that are under state mandates to do so, there's no problem at all. Um, my initial goal for this was to set up Open Syllabus on a commons model where we could just rely on schools to understand that the creation of a public commons in curricular materials was an unalloyed good, and that there would be strong reasons to act altruistically to build this commons. And I spent a number of years with that idea, kind of central to what we're doing. Ran into the problem that schools are not really set up to act altruistically. They're not good at coordinating altruistic behavior. They are good at buying services. And so we shifted to a service model that we thought could accomplish much the same thing, and are still in the process through the accumulation of these services in creating what we think of as an incentive structure that'll make this an easy decision for schools, where the benefits of working across these, having these kind of three sets of services available, just make it a no-brainer. Of course, they'll participate. But yeah, I mean, independent of having all of those incentives set up, yeah, you, it, we need a champion constituency at school at a school to make it work. And from our perspective, the library has is not always a strong enough, doesn't have enough leverage in these conversations to be that champion because they're too far away from the chain of control of the syllabi themselves. The registrar's office is in a different position. The the range of actors interested in subsequent employment for students are in a very different position at those schools, and so we hope that the combination of having multiple constituencies at a school creates a coordination problem, but also hopefully begins to resolve the question of why a school would do this and participate.
Thank you for that one. This next question comes from Chad Yen. When collecting or scraping syllabi from non-English speaking countries or institutions, has the project included only syllabi in English while sifting out syllabi not in English, or have project members translated these syllabi into English?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our data pipeline at the moment is Anglophone only. So we can only work with documents that have at least some English in them. So we scrape, we have a huge, kind of dark collection of materials that we just haven't identified yet. They're foreign language materials collected from universities that we've kept because, in anticipation of some future date in which we can work cross-language using machine translation in all likelihood. The parts of the collection that are, the very substantial portions of the collection from Italy, from Scandinavian countries, those are English language documents because English is the language of student mobility in Europe and most other countries. And so schools have increasingly moved toward dual language publication of the curricula. So at Italian schools, you'll almost always be able to generate an English language version of the curriculum, and we've scraped that and treated that as our representation of the curriculum at those schools. So that's the process that's generating most of the international collection at this point.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. This from Noah. You mentioned credential wallets. What do you hope ACRO members understand about the relationships between higher ed credentials, credential wallets, and the taxonomies you discussed earlier?
Well, so, I would like to think that Open Syllabus will play a kind of shallow but broad role in this area. of being a of being a source of course level skills data for anybody that wants it. And you know, the various kinds of wallet-like initiatives are almost certainly going to be among the consumers of that information. So all of the work that is trying to break down credentialization below the degree level is going to end up at the course level for looking for information about learning and skills at the course level. And we can begin to provide that. So we're completely agnostic on what what version of that should prevail. I have no opinion. There are a lot of interesting efforts out there. I think all of them, or almost all of them, are going to need course level skills data in order to describe student learning below the degree level in ways that, um, you know, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm a little lost my train of thought. They're all, yeah, the wallets are all going to be the wallet efforts are all going to be consumers of this kind of data. So we just want to be able to provide it in whatever taxonomy they care to use. And if it's Lightcast, great. If it's Open Skills Network, great. We're trying to be a kind of neutral provisioner of this information.
Well, thanks, Joe. And actually, everybody, let's give it up virtually for Joe. He has given us a good hour, a good flew-in induced hour of great information about Open Syllabus. So thank you, Joe. Thanks for hanging in there when I know you didn't feel your best. Thanks to all of you for attending the webinar. I hope you can see the value of Open Syllabus and a tool in many ways. Operationally, again, in terms of course matcher, or course articulation, and its possibilities in terms of translating those learning outcomes into skills and competencies that can be used in spaces beyond higher ed. All of those for the benefit of the students and learners that we serve. So I hope this all works really, really well for you. Thanks to all of you. I hope you have a good semester startup and a good semester until you get to the summer, when you get to relax a little bit once you get summer school started. So there you go. Thank you. Thanks again, Joe, and thanks to ACRO for having these great webinars.
Thanks to all of you.